welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Have You Heard, the podcast, everything about everything social.
Yeah.
I'm Joey. I'm paid media director here at The Social Shepherd. I'm joined by Jack. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Nice to meet you, everyone. Yeah, I'm Jack, one of the co-founders at The Social Shepherd.
Cool. So what are we talking about today?
Today is going to be all about how should we be targeting our Facebook audiences, not only about general campaign structure, but how can we think differently? Because naturally, some of the audiences do get very competitive. How can we think outside of that, I guess, box as such, and target audiences that might be interested in our product or service, and how we go about doing that? So I guess with like our normal campaign structure, it includes everything from dynamic ads for broad audiences, and then your top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. But I guess when you look at some of the prospecting audiences in that top of funnel campaign, what ad sets are you creating within that, and what looks, how are you sort of planning that in terms of those more out the box?
So I think things have massively changed, and I think we've had this discussion before on previous podcasts around how iOS 14 kind of really changed the landscape of how you do your audience targeting, because you need to be much broader in everything that you do. Pre-iOS, you could go really niche with the audiences you could target. You could overlay audiences on top of each other and come up with a really specific subset, of a really small group of people that you can target. Yeah. And it used to be really effective. We used to split those out by ad set, to be fair. We'd have each audience individually split out by ad set, and then we can individually identify the performance of which audience is working the best. But seeing the changes, obviously, from iOS 14 and the need to go much broader, we kind of have changed the tact in terms of the way that we're kind of using our audience targeting, and we need to think a little bit more outside the box. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we certainly see is, quite a lot of competitors in the ad space will be using targeting. So, if you're running an ad about t-shirts, they will be running targeting for interests in t-shirts and fashion, which is obviously okay. You're going after a high intent audience at that point, but also everyone else is doing that. Yeah. And the CPMs are going to be really, really high, which is obviously going to be eating away at any margins that you're trying to kind of produce from the meta side of things. So I think, that piece where you're thinking outside the box is kind of more and more important now than it kind of has ever been. And one of the ways that we do that is called customer profile targeting, essentially. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing here is looking at what is your typical customer, what are their interests, but not what are their interests that are directly related to the product or service that you're selling, but what are their other interests outside of that. Yeah. And I think we've seen really, really good success around really kind of branching out and tapping into those wider audience pools who might not necessarily, directly be in market for the products that you're trying to promote, but are definitely interested in, to some degree. And you can certainly start getting, when we're looking at it from a top of the funnel perspective, people to engage with the ad content, getting people onto site. They might but not be people that are going to direct convert, but then we can start feeding them further down the funnel to try and get them to convert later on. So it works really nicely in that process. What
does like an example of that look like?
So I think kind of a go-to that we kind of have is, we look at users that have, for example, a higher level of disposable income. I think the go-to for quite a lot of, marketers might be to look at luxury goods, fast cars, all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think quite the issue with some of those audiences is the fact they're quite aspirational and not actually related to having a large or higher amount of disposable income. So we're really trying to tap into things like what are those users actually doing in their day-to-day lives? Actually, one of the winners that we kind of always go for is looking at Waitrose and John Lewis, because typically from that basis, if you're within that middle class bracket and you've got a high level of disposable income, you will be shopping at John Lewis and Waitrose on the regular. So that kind of taps into that market quite nicely. And there's other avenues that we can go down as well. You can look at things like horse riding. You can look at things like road cycling, craft beer, craft coffee, like all of that kind of stuff fills that kind of void of, that kind of persona that we're trying to pull together at that stage. And essentially what we're doing is pulling all of those audiences together and putting them in an ad set. And, essentially we're looking at an ad set here that we've built specifically around higher disposable income audience. And that could be one audience profile that we've created that will then go off and target off the back end of that. And we'll have various amounts of those through our campaign structure as well. Probably 2, 3, 4 of those, depending on what our budgets are running through the campaign, just to make sure kind of that spend isn't getting too diluted. But I think it's really, really important to continue thinking outside of the box to make sure you're being cost efficient, competitive, and you're reaching those niche audiences that you might not have thought of before.
Does that play in any way in shape into the sort of creative strategy as well when you are creating a particular persona, and you might have 3 or 4 different personas that are likely to purchase? Are we thinking about creative in a different way that, maybe that more aspirational audience wants to see a different, or reacts to a different type of creative than maybe a different subsection of a typical customer? Yeah,
for sure. So we're always going to be testing in that environment to see what type of creative is going to respond, or what type of creative users are going to respond to kind of the best within each of those categories. But for sure, we're always looking to develop that creative strategy, not just as a blanket approach, but also with the audiences in mind that we're targeting.
I guess that can also play into as well, not only image, video, etc., but also the copy that we're writing as well, and different maybe features that we're mentioning about that product will relate more so to one audience versus another, where they might be more offer driven or discount driven. Someone else might be more feature driven and how it's actually going to benefit them. They're not as bothered by the price. They're just looking for it to, in different, they're going to use that product in a different way as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, one of the considerations to take around the audience targeting side of things is the fact, and it's been out for a while on Meta now, is the fact that you've got demographic targeting expansion. So even though you're putting all of your audiences into these ad sets, Facebook's going to go and find people outside of that it thinks are going to purchase your product or service anyway. So there's elements of the audience targeting that we're doing that we are trying to really hone down and trying to get as many learnings as possible and, test different creatives to those different audiences. But there's still, this AI piece that's going on outside of that, where the algorithm is just going to find people that are likely to purchase anyway, which is, out of our control at that stage. So, always worth considering when you're kind of putting that in.
So I guess the 2 main takeaways people can take from this podcast are going broad. Always think broad in terms of audience targeting. And I guess secondly, taking it back to more the old school approach of building those audience personas and really developing those through in your paid strategy, not just interested in t-shirt or the product type that you're marketing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anything else to add there?
I think that's everything, to be honest. Short and sweet today.
Yeah. No, it's always good to do these short ones as well. It's very much reminiscent of our older style that we used to produce as well. So thank you very much for everyone watching today or listening wherever you are. Please make sure to follow, subscribe wherever you are, and we'll be producing many more of these, all things paid social, as well as covering all sorts of social AI and search topics on that. But thank you very much, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you.